What I really loved about real estate is I'm good with numbers. I kind of understand the finance and things, but there is that creative component to it that I love. There's a construction component to it that I love. Just that the journey you go on, there's so many opportunities for you to question your own instincts. And when you have somebody else, or when you're low, someone there to be like, no, we got this, or vice versa. If they're low, you can do that. It helps build your own resolve. It helps build confidence in what you're doing.
Hey there. Welcome to the Peakality Podcast, your new favorite spot for unlocking the best version of yourself. Ready to level up your life? We've got you. We're all about blending technology with human wisdom and the drive to be better, personally and professionally. Each week, we dig into the real stuff, strategies, tools, and mindsets that cut through the noise and help you thrive. No fluff, just practical insights from experts, thought leaders, and people who've been there, done that. And we're here to break it all down into easy steps. Whether you're kicking off a fresh start or a physician seeking to inspire your patients, we've got stories, tips, and tricks to inspire growth in each area of life. Your peak potential's calling, starting right now. Hit subscribe, join our crew, and let's move forward today. Have you ever been to New York City and wondered who builds those skyscrapers? And who are these real estate developers that develop 4-acre developments that have been restricted from development for the past 40 years? I mean, who are these people? Well, my next guest and old dear friend, Rohan Mehra with the Prusik Group is and did just that. He's self-proclaimed hippie and he's a son of immigrants and he's only in his 40s and already one of the most successful self-made real estate developers, arguably in the world. And he works really hard to embrace the culture and the communities that face cultural gentrification and how to bring profit to those communities. And we talk about that as well as, bringing in Target, Trader Joe's to work with Harlem and NAACP and other organizations to ensure real estate can be managed by nice guys too. So join me in the conversation with Rohan and how and why he and his business partner do what they do and what easy steps you can take as an investor or a community activist. So let's get started. All right. How about we just start out with telling us about yourself? And I know that you were one of the key real estate developers for Essex Crossing. Can you explain to everybody exactly what that is and how you got it started and why it's such a big project and what you guys needed to do to overcome?
Sure. Well, I'll start off with who I am. My name is Rohan Mehra, and I'm co-founder and principal of the Prusik Group. We're a retail development, real estate development company based in New York City. We've been in existence for about 15 years. I've done this for about 22 years. Before that, I was an environmental engineer, and at some point in my career, I decided to make a change and haven't really looked back since then. So being based in New York and being a real estate developer, it's obviously advantageous to be developing local. And I would call Essex Crossing sort of that project for us that really launched the company, because other than Hudson Yards, which I think most people have heard of, sort of the building of a city within a city in New York, Essex Crossing is the second biggest development in the past 10 years in New York City. It was part of a public RFP process where the city owned about 6 acres in the heart of the Lower East Side, very historic and popular neighborhood in the city. And they had owned it for a better part of 50 years, but a lot of political infighting in the neighborhood and with local politicians and all that sort of just mired it in this situation where it was there was formerly housing on the site and it had been knocked down as part of urban renewal, and the renewal part never happened. So it became parking lots for city vehicles, and it was a really odd situation because the subway was right there. It was Main and Main in the Lower East Side, and the rest of the neighborhood around it continued to sort of grow and be very popular, lots of housing, incredible diversity, but it got stuck. And then you fast forward to about 2008, and Mayor Bloomberg came in and said, we're going to unstick this thing. He kind of got the sense of why it was stuck and basically he had his agencies take it through the approvals process, which took away a little of the ability of the local politicians to sort of infight and mire it. So him and his agencies did that for the better part of 5 years. They issued an RFP process. Being the size and location it was a very hotly contested RFP. We were one of 4 developers on our team that eventually won it in the fall of 2013. And big picture, it's about 2 million square feet. It's about a $2 billion development, 1,100 apartments, 400,000 square feet of office, 400,000 square feet of retail. There's a museum, movie theater, bowling alley, grocery store. So it's really got a little bit of everything. New home for the Essex Street Market, our own market space called the Market Line. Really try to get creative with how we would honor the community, provide it stuff it was lacking, but still make people feel like they belonged. And I think that's why we were ultimately picked. So fast forward 10 years, we've completed 2 of the 3 phases, which is effectively about 90% of the development.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So many questions
Okay.
and all of that. That's just amazing, first of all. And that was great overview. I did not realize that you switched careers. We've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
When exactly did you switch
It's
careers?
what brought me to New York City, actually. So I went to college and grad school originally to be an environmental engineer. I did that for like a year in Oregon, a couple years in DC, and then I realized it wasn't really for me. Wasn't sort of the career path I wanted. So I went to business school at NYU. And actually, originally, one of my plans had been to maybe open up a furniture design and manufacturing company. But then I realized I didn't have the skill set that you need for that. The idea was cool, but I didn't. I wasn't a furniture maker. I didn't have a design
So it sounds
background.
like you were really missing like the creative side,
Yeah,
and that's and where the engineering was great because you get to work and figure out the functionality of
yeah.
things environmentally. However, you wanted to find a creative outlet, which, I mean, hello, when you're working on a 6 acre development, you have to get creative, and that's really cool, and all the elements that you brought in and what you were able to
I
pull
haven't
off in
described it
15
that way,
years.
Courtney, but you've really hit the nail on the head there. The issue with my engineering job is, as an environmental engineer, all of the work was for municipalities, and all of them, basically have to take low bid contracts. So the best way to be the low bidder is to just redo what you've done somewhere else. So that's sort of what really kind of lost my interest. Was we would go into a situation, and the way we would prepare documents for it would be like, okay, there's a project we did like this in Kansas City. Let's pull up those documents and just, relabel them, kind of a thing. That's what everybody does in that industry. So yeah, it had no creative outlet. And yeah, what I really loved about real estate is, I'm good with numbers. I kind of understand the finance of things, but there is that creative component to it that I love. There's a construction component to it that I love. And that's been my whole life. That's outside of work. That's what I do now. I do woodworking, I do construction and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think
Yeah,
you're
that's
right.
really
It's a
cool.
lot of
Yeah,
the
you and your
creativity.
family moved out to the mountain or out to the lake,
Yeah.
and just to kind of get out and the kids could run around, which we both have in common. We both have twins,
Yeah.
which God
Twin
has a sense of
girls.
humor.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. We'll survive.
Yeah.
But yes, okay. So going back to you switch careers, and then within that 15 years, you have really accomplished a lot, and yet you're the son of immigrants, and you've worked your way up to be one of the top New York City developers, and therefore I would arguably say in the world. How What do you feel as though, I mean, obviously I think that you've been able to combine your creativity with the numbers, but what is it that you think that like enabled you to kind of even get there? How did what and kind of take these leaps and these chances? What do you think that kind of enabled you? Do you think that it was the support people around you? Do you think that it was your own mindset? Do you think that it was just a drive that you've always had? Like, where do you think, like, what do you think that it is that kind of enabled you to propel to where you are today?
That's a really great question. Really great question. So I think thinking that through, I think there's sort of two key things that jump to mind quickly. One would be the first job that I got in real estate, not including an internship I had during business school, but the first job after business school. This is sort of kind of post 9/11 New York, not long before you and I met. So, not the easiest time to find a job. If you could find one, you took it. And I got a job with Forest City Ratner Companies in New York. They were a pretty good sized developer there. And I was placed in their retail group. I didn't, I mentioned that I'm a retail real estate developer, developing shopping malls, grocery stores, movie theaters, things like that. But there was nothing prior to that job that sort of suggested that's where I should be. But that's the group I got hired into. And one, I
Did you
think
hear from about I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you hear about them from a friend? You knew of the reputation because you went to
it was
Cornell
more
for
just like,
undergrad?
I was going into a new industry. I was pretty new to the city, meaning I had only been here for school. So my network wasn't there. So I was like using whatever friends I had network. I cannot remember exactly how I got on their radar, but that I do remember when I first got the call for the interview. I was boarding a bus at Port Authority to go up to Maine for the weekend. And I was, that's where my mind was. I was like, I have no sort of active leads. And I met with them and they gave me an offer quickly. And what I would say that was really great about that opportunity, one, I think in retail real estate development, there is a bit more creativity involved because there's different types of stores. If you're developing, and I'm not taking anything away from the other uses, but if you're developing residential, you can kind of look at market comps and there, the creativity comes in different ways as opposed to, hey, maybe if we put this store here, that store here. So that kind of side of the business, I think, appealed to me. But probably more importantly was my boss at the time. He was very much one of these people who was like, I'm going to let you run with this, ask questions if you have them, but if you can do it, you get to do it. He wasn't a micromanager. He
That's
had
great.
basic levels of faith that I could figure it out. And I just sort of thrived. And he loved it because he didn't have to babysit me. And I loved it because as long as I was doing my work, he didn't care, So I had flexibility a little bit. I'm not saying I wasn't like showing up at the office, but again, not overseeing me, not caring if I handled meetings, just so long as things were moving and I kept them updated. And so that really allowed me to thrive, and it really allowed me, for someone who is brand new to an industry, I was a VP within a year, and like it really built up the steam for the second biggest key to my career. Probably was in that first job, we partnered on a deal, and I met my business partner, a guy by the name of Andrew Katz. We started the Prusik Group together, and without a doubt, and he and I both say this to anybody who asks us about our company, the biggest thing we ever did was finding partners with sort of like ethos, like mentality. We're both, I think, pretty good at everything, but the things that we do really complement in terms of how we look at things. We can really complement each other, bounce ideas off each other. We're best friends and that kind of a thing. I think I've even talked to you about that before when, talking about, your journey in starting the numerous companies you're
Everything.
starting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How helpful it is, how key it is to sort of have that sounding
Have the
board, that confidence. I can't
Just
imagine.
having the right people around you.
Yeah, and just that the journey you go on, there's so many opportunities for you to question your own instincts. And when you have somebody
Yeah.
else, or when you're low, someone there to be like, no, we got this, or vice versa. If they're low, you can do that. It helps build your own resolve. It helps build confidence in what you're doing. So those two
And
things really
so
jump out at me.
refreshing. Yeah, because I mean, I think that people look at people like you and think that, oh, I mean, people like that are invincible. They don't have challenges. They don't have, things just kind of fall into place. And I think that, you being authentic and real, just saying, hey, we all, no matter where you are in life, you still have questions and doubts and, um, lows,
Yeah.
and we need the people around you to support you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's probably a common misconception too, is that we see someone who has succeeded, or someone who's succeeded, especially like entrepreneurially, and
Mhm.
that doesn't mean they didn't fail 12 times before that. All it means is that one of the times it hit, right? So you can't really just make up the past of what they went through, the struggles they had, how many times they failed, how many times they made bad decisions, how many times they got screwed over. There's probably a long story behind any of them. So, and again, that's where I
Yeah,
think the partner comes in. We started Prusik probably 9 months before the financial crash in 2008.
oh my God.
Not a great time for two young guys to start a company in sort of real estate
That's
land.
right. I keep forgetting that it was like right then, right when
Yeah.
the crash happened. Oh my God.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you guys
So
got through it,
got
which is
through it, but
amazing.
there were, yeah, just basically, duct taping our lives together to get through things, and
And
um,
then you guys
moving
also
things on.
opened the market line, which is 100, like the way that I explain it, it's like having a super target in the middle of the city that's filled with like high end and local restaurants in New York City, which is just amazing in and of itself. But you opened the market line right before COVID hit, correct?
Correct. Which was, yeah, that was really difficult. So the market line inspired, I mentioned the Essex market before, down at Essex Crossing, sort of the city's premier public market. Oddly enough, New York City doesn't really have the public markets that other cities of this diversity have around the country or around the world. You think of Pike Place in Seattle or Ferry Terminal in San Francisco. New York has some food halls and stuff. Chelsea Market comes to mind. So, as part of our efforts down the Lower East Side, we said, let's expand upon Essex Market. This has been the gateway for immigrants forever. This is a great way for us to sort of honor that history and revitalize it into the future, giving people, the counter narrative to, like, oh, everything is a pharmacy or a bank or a cell phone store nowadays. It's, shopping is boring. So let's go back to, what really has the most character. But like you said, we opened in November of 2019. 30 small business vendors. 95% of them were New York City based. 70% of them were immigrant, minority, or women owned businesses. So it was really a great sort of story, great counter narrative to some of the other stuff. But then, yeah, pandemic hit mid March. Um, and the original plan had been for that market to span 3 blocks. And what happened with the pandemic really is it caused us to, we talked about creativity. You can have a great vision, a great dream that everybody's excited about. But the creativity is, what do you do when what you thought was going to happen doesn't happen? And certainly none of us expected a pandemic, and certainly not one that was 2 years long, and certainly not one that still, I'm not sure what's happening with the office market or how people are working and things like that. I mentioned we have office space down the project, so a lot of different things, but we've been able to pivot on the next 2 blocks. One of them, I just signed a lease 2 weeks ago with a 45,000 square foot gym called Vital. That was really
Congratulations.
exciting. Yeah, not stuff that's happening too often in New York right now. And then the other block has turned into a very attractive event space for corporate and private events, art shows, not for profit galas,
Oh,
things
that's
like
great.
fashion shows. Yeah, so we've pivoted. We had some great spaces, and these things kind of all complement each other. So we're using that creativity to try to, not quite exactly what we thought was going to happen, but keeping things going.
And you also are doing some creative things with some lower income communities where you are embracing the culture while also bringing in opportunity. Can you explain a little bit more about that project? Because I know
Sure.
you've touched base with me on it, but I also want to kind of get an update.
Yeah, I would love to. So, another big project that we've worked on is up on 125th Street in New York. That's the main thoroughfare through Harlem. And that project was us as the retail developer. It's 177 units of housing, New York State's first civil rights museum,
Oh, wow.
New headquarters for the National Urban League, which was originally founded there, then left. So now we're bringing them back. They're our partners in the deal.
Wow, that's great.
Some office space, and then about 80,000 square foot of retail, which we're bringing to Trader Joe's and a Target to the neighborhood.
That's
And it was
awesome.
interesting, with all that stuff I just said, when we did our groundbreaking with the public, the biggest cheers came when Target and Trader Joe's were announced, because what has happened in these communities, as we can all imagine and all we know is the case, is that certain neighborhoods, depending on demographics or socioeconomic factors, have been ignored by a lot of these larger retailers.
Yeah.
And, at first blush, you may look at that and say, okay, so they have to go a little farther to shop. That's not great, but it's not terrible. But what these large retailers allow is they become the gateway often for other things to happen. You bring an anchor tenant like a Target or a Trader Joe's, they have great credit. Banks want to lend you money based off of that. And then you can start to do all these other things. So it
Absolutely.
allows you to break ground on your construction. Same thing we did down at Essex Crossing. Every single building that we broke ground on construction, we had a large scale tenant with a lease done. So
Mhm.
that's how we're able to, make sure we can build a museum and work with the National Urban League. So we looked at that, and with the
So
groundswell
really
sort
the
of,
key driver is the main tenant, and then you
it
can bring
really
the other partners
helps.
in, because otherwise financially, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be able to make the numbers work.
Yeah,
And
and you have
in
to give the
order
bank certainty that it's going to work, meaning that they don't want
exactly.
to lend on speculation. They want to lend on certainty. So most of the time they'll say, yeah, we'll give you this loan once you have a lease done with those guys, because that lease is basically bankable. It's like a bond. It's guaranteed. Hey, you give me a building, you will get this cash flow stream. So we looked at that and we're like, hey, this is an interesting thing with the sort of Black Lives Matter movement. The timing was all similar. Retailers sort of adjusting and admitting certain, perhaps things they were doing that they shouldn't, ignoring certain neighborhoods. And we said, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to expand into areas that have been ignored and do responsible development in a non-gentrifying way. Like if you look at 125th Street, it's not a gentrifying deal. It's 177 units of affordable housing, permanently affordable.
Exactly.
In fact, a third of them are for kids who age out of foster care, which to me is just
Oh,
like,
wow.
I get almost choked up when I think about that. Like you just think about a
Yeah.
kid turning 18 and just being like, still never really had the formalized family structure. What are they supposed to do?
Where to begin? Where to go?
Yeah. So you can
Wow,
do
that's
stuff like
amazing.
that. It sort of becomes the key. So we started to look at, hey, what are neighborhoods where we could kind of replicate this model? Um, and so we have deals in the works in Philly and DC and Atlanta and New Orleans. Varying
That's
scales.
awesome.
Probably the most exciting one is the one down in Atlanta, which, knock on wood, hopefully, continues to move forward. It's an 11-acre site right by the Atlanta University Center, and just an incredible neighborhood, and one where we really think we could, sort of bring stuff there that
Make a
hadn't been
positive
there.
impact.
Yeah, workforce housing,
Yeah.
community benefits, all that good stuff.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, that's really amazing, all
Thanks.
that you're doing. And I think it's really cool that, I mean, I know that you're a hippie at heart, and you have, embrace, different cultures and backgrounds. And I think it's really cool how you're now incorporating that into work and real estate. And I think that, the perception of people that are in this business are really, cutthroat and doggy dog, which there are obviously those, but I think that there's a testament that you can do positive things, and even in your neighborhood. And I think a lot of people are that I've spoken to are just really curious how to even begin to learn about commercial real estate, how to invest in commercial real estate. And when you talk to people, when you're going in and buying their properties, really anywhere, and you're talking to these, mom and pop or big investors, what would you advise people that really haven't gotten or made the leap into commercial real estate? I mean, I have my own things that I tell them, but what would you tell people at the grand scale that you're at? And if someone just wants to start small, where would you even begin and what would you do?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I have a great answer, but I think that, one good place to start is starting, the areas that you know best, right? Don't get caught up in speculation around, hey, this is going to be the new hot neighborhood. Your competitive advantage with something is always going to be what you know the most about, and what you know the most about is going to be the stuff you see every day. You're going to one who's going to know, oh, I know people go to that coffee shop because it's on that corner. It's easier to pull over there before you get on the freeway over there. Other people aren't necessarily going to see that. So, you don't need to get caught up like, oh, I hear that neighborhood is going to be the next blank, because if you're hearing that, everybody else is hearing that, and that just leads to elevated prices, frothiness in the market, yeah,
Yeah.
self-perpetuating. And if you're, the interesting thing, like even in this market where things aren't that great, to me this is like a buyer's market. When things are hot and interest rates are low, you have to outbid what is effectively the most foolish person in the room, the one, right, the one who's going to put in the biggest bid. And when times are a little tougher, or you go into areas that are less hot, there's less people bidding, and there's less chance that there's going to be that one person who you have to outbid, that is probably not necessarily based in the facts or the situation. So that's sort of where I would start, and then it can grow with your experience grows, and then you can grow into other bigger things.
Okay, so let's talk about, you're saying, and when you're in the way that the market is turning and what's happening with the economy, and where, and the person it's a buyer's market right now, but some people are talking about the lending, they're also talking about inflation. When you look at the bigger picture, where do you see this economy? Where do you see the economy going? Where do you see, kind of, if you were a buyer, or if you were a seller, how would you look at the market today versus maybe, by the end of the year? How do you see the market right now playing out, not only for as yourself and the investments in the properties that you have, but looking to go and buy or to sell?
I think that's the most difficult question right now, because where we find ourselves, and this is very impactful in New York City, is when things have happened in the past. We talked about 2008 financial crisis, and I mentioned moving to New York right after 9/11. In both of those situations, it was a big event that caused a shock wave, and then things slowly reverted. Did they change a bit? Sure. But they kind of reverted to a similar kind of thing. The interesting thing about the pandemic is it's caused that shock wave, the big event in the office market. And I don't think there's anybody who feels like we're reverting back to where we were. I don't think anybody's like, oh, for sure, I'm
Definitely
going to
not.
start working Fridays in the office. I think, I was laughing about it with a friend the other day. I was like, do you remember when we first started working and you used to have to work an extra hour during the 4 weeks so that you get a half day on Friday? Like in this
Yeah.
world, like that is, you would laugh if somebody
It's
told you that. You'd be
absurd.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll be at home. Don't worry. You know where to find me. We're on a Zoom or whatever.
I mean, because even don't you do the similar thing? Because you guys
Yeah, I'm in the
moved.
office 2 or 3 days a
Yeah.
week. Yeah, and the rest of the time I'm
Yeah.
zooming. And yeah, truth be told, that the change of sort of that paradigm shift and the way people were looking at office work certainly played a part in my willingness. I live about an hour and a half from the city. If I was doing this 5 days a week, I couldn't do that.
No way.
So I think that generally I'm a believer that things kind of swing like a pendulum. Like when people are like, okay, online shopping is going to kill the retail industry forever, and it certainly felt like it was going that certain way. Eventually, it swings back. It doesn't necessarily swing back all the way, but we're evolving along sort of a moving pendulum path. Now, this time it does feel like there's been a reset of the pendulum. And I think that's where everybody is a little bit puzzled. Like, there's so much office space in New York. It's not yet hit the point where it's vacant. There's a lot of companies that are like, hey, we planned for this
Do
expense. We're
you
going to keep it
do you
going.
see that converting to something else? Do you see it converting to apartments or into,
I mean, it's going to be interesting. People have started that effort. I was just talking to a friend who just put a bid in on Madison Avenue on a building to convert it. it's a difficult one because, and this is a New York centric answer, right? Where there's a lot of offices are in high rises. So let's say you have a high rise building, you'd be like, okay, let's just convert it to apartments. Apartments, every sort of room needs to have windows. Um, uh, Office floors, you'll typically have like a kitchenette and one bulk bathrooms. Every apartment needs multiple runs of, multiple wet walls. So basically, what you'd have to do to New York skyscrapers, you have to hollow out the middle, and you'd have to run all this plumbing through it. So it starts to be like, well, what can you get this building for that you could do all that work, convert it to residential, and have it sort of make sense? So I think in certain markets that's going to make sense. It'll be interesting to see what happens in New York. I guess if there's no use for it, that might happen. It's a lot of office space though, but we certainly do have a housing shortage.
Wow.
New
I
York
mean,
housing is
that's
as
like,
expensive as it's ever
I'd
been.
never even thought about.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to start thinking about like all the, I mean, just the windows alone and just the plumbing alone, you
Yep.
think with apartment versus office, which is interesting when you're thinking of New York City and how that's laid out. And then I was sitting there thinking, I mean, could you turn it into also medical or, I don't even know, medical treatment centers and stuff? I don't, it's like, what,
I
because
mean, you
the
can do
use
all
has
that
to
around the
come.
edges. I just don't know if there's a critical mass of that to, consume what's
Exactly.
effectively millions of square feet.
Millions of square
Yeah.
feet. It's just, I mean, yeah, that's going to be really, whew, that's going to be interesting how to watch New York City and see
Yeah.
what ends up happening with all that
But
space.
all that being said, and
Um,
everything I said along those lines, there is, my office is in Midtown, and every month there's more people walking the streets. There's more office traffic. There's more people in the restaurants for lunch and all.
so
Um,
you think that people left and now
it's
they're
still
still
a
coming
pendulum. I
back?
just don't think it's going back to 5 days a week. I don't think it's going back to, that sort of rhythm of life. I
Yeah,
think probably Fridays are going to be soft from now on. So I think, I don't think it's going to be a situation where people give up office space altogether. I think people are seeing the inefficiency with that. I think, people like sort of the social culture. There are downsides to not going to an office as much as people like to sort of have full flexibility.
sure.
So I think there is going to be a continued need for the office space, but it'll just be interesting to see how much
Where did
and
you
how
see
it's
most
used.
people move or like migrating? Where do you feel like that the migration has really taken? Because see, being in Florida, we've seen a significant
Yeah.
rush of people move down here in the
Low
past,
taxes, high
3 years.
temps. It's a good
Yeah,
recipe to
exactly.
attract
I
people.
mean,
Yeah.
it's good living.
Yeah.
Sunshine all the
That's
time,
true.
great thunderstorms.
Yeah.
Yes, so it's good stuff. But I mean, it seems as though that a lot of people went also to Texas, but a lot of people just went to the suburbs, like you. I mean, and then they're just coming in for work, and then they just kind of move back out.
Yeah, I
So
think
it
I think it
seems
depends
as
a bit on
though,
situations. The
sure,
suburbs sort of appeal to people with like me. I have 3 children, so suburbs appeal to that. I think, I mean, certain families certainly went down to Florida, but a lot of my friends who moved to Florida were the ones without kids because they're like, well, I'm kind of sick of the city. It's not back to where it was, which it certainly isn't. The nightlife isn't back. The restaurant scene isn't back. Sort of that spark and liveliness. I don't think it's back. I think it'll come back eventually. But
absolutely, it's New York.
there's the trade-off, right? Like you put up with the hard
Yeah,
parts of New York because of how amazing it could be. And I think some people through the pandemic was really difficult. And so they're like, yeah, I'm going to take a break. I know a lot of people who went to Los Angeles because it just feels different, right?
yeah,
It's like, okay, I've been,
a lot of people move there. I feel like a
yeah,
lot of New Yorkers moved to LA. A lot of people in California
yeah,
moved to Arizona or Texas, or
right.
even Florida.
Yeah.
Um,
The
so it's been
consistent thing is
interesting.
there is like it's a little bit of a switch from New York where you're outside much more. There's natural beauty.
Yeah.
It's a different lifestyle. What I'm hopeful for is that like with the high prices in New York, that some of these what you might call second cities or secondary cities will start to not start because it's already started, but they'll continue to sort of grow. I think
Yeah.
the whole America as LA, Chicago, New York, and a handful of other cities isn't a great thing. during all the booms of America, I think places like Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh, and all these other cities were thriving. They had their industries and their nightlife and their music, and it'd be fun and interesting to get some of that back.
That's interesting that you kind of haven't thought of it this way. We have these like different movements, the industrial movement, and like how and why people move to cities versus move to the suburbs, and that flux, and how they label it. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, and the influence that this pandemic had on the entire world, and how it's really not only brought us together, but how we work,
Right.
and that flux. So, and it's interesting to see. I am really actually very interested to see how you play this out with your creativity in real estate. So we will have to continue this conversation and find out what you're doing creatively with all this take place and transpiring in the world right now.
And all that's transpiring
So
with you. I'm excited and I'm watching with admiration with everything you're doing.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, hopefully we'll all be able to talk about it soon.
Yes.
Everyone right now is just seeing social media stuff, but it will all be announced soon. So that'll be exciting.
Can't wait.
Yay. Awesome. Thanks so much, Rohan. I so appreciate it. And let's do it again soon.
Thanks for having me. It was great.